So what I was thinking for this meeting is to start with just sort of like an overview of where we're at, and then sort of open the floor to like clarification and question. And like any question at this point to clarify what these different things mean, what, you know, any sort of like lingering questions people have about the design or like where we are, what things mean. Because like as I think about it, and I'll start with just like a little bit of an overview of how, you know, which we talked a little bit about last time, but an overview of how I see this board looking right now and what it means to, you know, for all these different things. Basically, it's like this, I see this as like a vertical hierarchy where the two DAOs represent like anything that is like horizontal to a DAO, to me, is a decision or a governance thing or something owned by the DAO. Anything below it are services provided to like lower tier DAOs. And then the same can be said down here, right? Where we have the services we talked about, like product liability for vendors possibly, warehousing and fulfillment, and marketplace UI, which are things that are provided by the marketplace DAOs. And then these are like the decision genres that they can make. And then up at the top here, we have this section for like voting power, which is like, how do we determine the voting power, you know, the token voting power of this DAO, right? So you can see like this is a controlling mechanism for this DAO, which provides these services, which is consumed by this DAO, which, you know, and again, I don't know if we should have a different voting power mechanism, probably similar, but like that's something maybe we need to flesh out and discuss, which provides these services ultimately to vendors and buyers. So, and with that sort of, again, like vertical hierarchical view, drilling down into any one of these like boxes is a system we need to design, right? So this is like large scale system design. How does the whole system look? And then individual boxes are like, how does this system work, right? How does the justice system work? How does the vendor escrow system work, right? So with that, I'll sort of open it up and to give you some time to like think about what kind of questions you would want. Things I would love to hear would be, do you think there's other systems here that need to be fleshed out? Do you have clarifying questions about the nature of any of these systems or this system as a whole? Do you think there are other kinds of governance systems? Do you think that there are other kinds of services? So, you know, anybody feel free to start, but I'll give it a little bit of time and just shut the fuck up for a moment.
All right, thanks, Bo. Oops.
Something that I personally am pretty interested in is the distinction between the Loadpipe DAO sort of governance, you know, because I think that's very relevant for our like vendor-centric focus conversations that we've had before, and then sort of talking about what the Hamza DAO, or let's just say the generic marketplace DAO, like what sort of actions they would be taking. That I think that's a very important distinction to make, because that impacts a lot of other things, like the white paper, for example, but also, like the vendors.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's the distinction between the actions that the protocol DAO and marketplace DAO can take.
Correct. Yeah. And maybe the best way to explore that is looking at the actions a marketplace DAO would take specifically. Because I think the Loadpipe DAO stuff is pretty clear at like broad strokes level, at least for me.
Okay, distinctions between actions that the protocol DAO and marketplace DAO can take. So I would say that is, again, that's this sort of like, and you know, let's start defining some terms, right? These are protocol DAO actions. Okay, I need maybe to separate these a little bit more. Let's bring this up a bit. But in broad strokes, this category I'm creating here, these are all actions that can be taken by the protocol DAO, right? And so like there's parameterizing the incentive system, and then there's workflow governance, and then there's executive decisions, right? kicking a marketplace and kicking a vendor are the only ones that really come to mind for me, but I would be open, like, does anybody have any ideas of what other actions like the protocol DAO should be able to take? And then similarly, we can dive into that for the Hamza DAO.
Yes, maybe I'll let you.
Into the Hamza DAO? Or can I?
Andres,
Well, the way I understand it is that Protocol DAO provides all the necessary parameters for the rating for the Hamza DAO to construct, or any other marketplace DAOs to construct their rating systems. And the decision of how to construct the rating systems and weigh each of the parameters is up to the marketplace DAO. Is that correct? For one instance.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Is one instance of a distinction between a protocol DAO and the marketplace DAO would be that the marketplace DAO determines how to use each of the indicators or measures to construct its own rating system for the users.
Like a Federal Reserve. Do we go back to the Federal Reserve concept? It was actually, in a way.
Well, I'm not talking monetary policy or emissions policy. I'm just talking about the user rating system that the marketplace employs. Each marketplace could weigh certain parameters differently. You know what I mean?
Ooh, I see what you're saying. I think that this is an interesting distinction, because I think what that means is like there actually is, I think, a rating score, right? So like ratings, and I think this is maybe broken into several categories actually. Like I think that there's marketplace ratings, and we'll have to like expand this at some point, but there's marketplace, vendor, and judge, right? So these are all three rating systems which are coordinated at the protocol level, right? So there's these ratings, but the rating I think you're talking about is like the rankings of vendors, and that I think it has a lot more to do with like search internally in like Hamza, right? Like, and search rankings for products based on like the rating of vendors. And so, yeah, I do think that there is like a marketplace would have an internal ranking system. They could just inherit the ranking from the protocol.
Yes.
Yeah, or they could implement their own sort of like ranking algorithm. But again, that would be how things are populated on the front end, not necessarily reflective of like writing to protocol stuff. So I think that's like, we could even call that like a service down here. Like you could call this like internal vendor ranking. Now these squares are all higgledy-piggledy.
And maybe even buyer ratings, Bo.
Yeah.
Like how soon does a buyer release the escrow to the vendor? That might be a decision. That might be an indicator which different marketplaces use differently. So some marketplaces could be more vendor oriented, others could be more buyer oriented. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, and I think you're right, because I think that also probably belongs up here. And again, please, anyone feedback or thoughts on this would be appreciated. Could we be including like a reputation?
It's just worth noting. I just want to say for the record, as much as I'm an internet marketer, SEO, it's kind of a content marketer, I do agree with. Like these search engines now and Web 2 that don't disclose their algorithm. I think that is something that there should be some privacy or proprietary part to. I don't think it should be fully. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know how Twitter is doing it exactly. Is Twitter transparent about their algorithm? I've heard they've been more open.
Twitter's open source, but I think again, this gets to like the distinction between types of ranking, right? So like. Now these are all different sizes. This is going to bother me. Oh, well, I'm not going to look at it. There's the internal ranking that like Hamza DAO and the marketplaces can do, and that's like entirely proprietary. But like the protocol rankings should be open source and predictable. And, again, those come after so James outlined, we work to outline what a marketplace reputation, what inputs a marketplace reputation might have. That would all fit within this marketplace ratings block. And then we have to do similar things for these guys. These guys, it's a little bit simpler, right? For buyers, it's how fast after you receive your item do you release the payment? How often are you leaving reviews? There's not too many things. How often does a vendor dispute you? How often do you lose disputes? Vendors similarly, there's only so many inputs, whereas marketplaces are a little bit more complex. And judges, there's a whole other system which we haven't even really gotten to for judge ratings that I don't know that we want to dive into. But does that answer your question, Jose?
Yeah, pretty much. I understand that the protocol would be open in regards to the data collected by all protocol users, vendors, and buyers, right? And it would be up to each marketplace to determine its own algorithm for the ranking systems.
Yeah. I mean, marketplaces probably should display protocol level rating, but again, when it comes to marketplace UI, you could even say that this is a subset of marketplace UI, right? Mm-hmm. Because marketplace UI is the service that they're creating, and they're creating a way to interact with the products and the protocol. And one of those aspects of them creating that UI would maybe being them developing their own internal vendor or buyer rankings.
Yeah.
And so it's possible.
As far as the data that's visible, right? As I see it, at least, vendors, for example, could see their big R score, but they can also see the variables that are contributing to that. And so if a marketplace wants to prioritize one of the smaller variables in terms of how they serve up the information in the UI, I don't think there's really anything stopping them, right? Okay, we want someone with zero complaints. Someone with zero complaints is ranked higher. Or we want someone who can deliver quickly. Someone with quick delivery, is higher.
Excuse me, James, could you briefly remind me again what the big R means? I mean, it's a user reputation, but what do you understand by big R?
Yeah, user reputation. There are some variables that we've discussed. We haven't really fleshed them out yet, but what we have listed is big R is a sort of sum of all of the little reputations within a category. So escrow time is a little R, unique buyer reputation or unique vendor reputation is a little R, dispute time is a little R, dispute performance, order completion rate, real reviews, stickiness score, I think is something Mike talked about. Those are all the little R's. And
okay.
Yeah, they're put together for that big reputation score.
So what I was saying basically is that protocol provides all the little R's for marketplaces to determine the formula for their big R.
I mean, we could do it that way, but I think as a protocol service, especially because we anticipate vendors are going to participate in more than one marketplace, having a universal rating might be beneficial and, also serve to make Loadpipe more relevant, I suppose. Oh no!
There could also be a default big R from the protocol levels, and most marketplaces would sort of inherit that same formula, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would the use case or advantage be in your mind for having why would a marketplace want to set their own localized reputation for vendors?
Well, in PERS, I remember that we had different managements, administrations, and each administration would place a different value on sellers or earners. And sometimes they would place more importance on the earners or on the sellers, mostly on the buyers. And that created, different outcomes. So I think each marketplace should be free to determine its own the way they rank users and the importance they give to to buyers and to sellers in this case, you know?
Yeah, I would
Well,
second.
and also,
Okay.
go ahead, Mike.
I would second that. I think there should be like a protocol global rating, but I do feel we've had those focus groups with some sellers like Nina and others, and they were concerned as a seller if a new seller comes onto this marketplace and just imports all their reviews from other marketplaces, they would like dilute the value and the work that seller's done on that local marketplace. And there should be a way to maybe allow I think it's about being transparent, really. There's maybe the marketplace could display its own reviews and ratings, and it also show global ratings maybe separately. I like the idea of being granular or allowing it to be different data sets that could be used for indicators.
Yeah, I mean, nothing is stopping someone running a marketplace from having their own reputation score. And one of the other things this affects, I think, is like paid ads, right? So, like, for instance, if a marketplace wants to allow vendors to pay for like better placement, that implies that they have their own like ranking system, or at least like they have a way to override, the ranking that is written on like a vendor profile that's on chain. Right. So like they have they choose how they're going to display it. It could be that a DAO is just like, look, we don't care about anything internal. We care about like what your reputation is globally written on chain, and they just display that. Another marketplace may, could be like a fucking New York City open mic where they like charge you $5 to go on, right? And they're like, oh yeah, you have to pay the fee if you want to be ranked at all, right? I don't know if that would be a great vendor experience, but like, yeah, marketplaces can do sort of whatever they want.
And you know what? The protocol could in turn rank or weigh each of the different marketplace big R's based on volume. So like say you have Hamsa A, Hamsa B, Hamsa C, they all have their different rating systems. And the user score for that system would be based on the weight for each marketplace, which is in turn based on the volume of that marketplace.
Yeah, so we haven't talked about this in a long time, but in the tokenomic model playground document, we kind of are, or at least we were, creating an aggregate emission score, which takes into account the reputation as well as the revenue that a specific marketplace is making. The idea being is you can have a perfect reputation and not be earning any money, and you're not getting any emissions. Likewise, you could be earning a lot of money and have a reputation score of 0 and not be earning any emissions because you're a bad actor. And so, I think that is one of the Loadpipe governance level sort of decisions within that. I think emissions, or what do you have it there? I was following you within the incentive system, and they would sort of be determining how to value that. The Loadpipe level incentive system, so like what we're giving the marketplaces. And it would
so like these, all of these are like functionally like this marketplace rating is this marketplace, like this emissions here, right? That arrow that goes from token vault to marketplaces is determined by this, right? So you could even say this sort of like governs this, but I'm not going to but it's also a service that it provides to the DAOs, right? Ranking vendors, buyers, judges. So it would exist. The rating governs this up here. It also governs all of these emissions at the Loadpipe level in some sort of like backwards way. And governance at this level has the ability to change these formulas, more or less. But I think that gets a little bit more complicated.
And just, not that we have the chart here, but just so we understand, what he was saying is that it's not just the ratings necessarily, but it's also the throughput that a specific marketplace is having. So, if Hums is doing a lot of business, right, that would also, be part of the formula for the incentive system as well as the ratings.
Well, the rating of marketplaces, and for instance, is like takes into account volume. Well, okay, maybe it doesn't. Maybe I see what you're saying. Maybe there's like, okay, so what you're saying is that there's a rating and there's a weighting, for lack of a better term, right? Like there's a rating, which is like how good you are, and there's a weighting of like how much volume you're doing. But there could be other things that determine weight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Simply because, we probably don't want that as someone's like reputation. I mean, it could be like a sister variable, but then you just have the very, very large organizations being able to achieve maybe a similar reputation score, even though they're doing bad stuff compared to like a smaller vendor who's a good actor.
So there's a few other data points. I don't know. We should probably keep it flexible. I don't think we can get them all, but like, so Amazon just added something on one of our listings for the bar supplies. We had a call Wednesday night, not returned often. And then his name's Christian. He actually, I think some of you might know him, but he works with other sellers too, not just us. He's a contractor, and he says his other client actually has frequently returned product on his product listing that they're very upset about. So, I mean, I just would like to, I don't know, I just want to make sure we're flexible and kind of, elastic on this type of stuff, because it's evolving even at the mature, I would call Amazon level of these different indicators.
Interesting. Yeah,
It's
like
not a
product
fixed
rating
thing.
is another, right? Because that's not a vendor reputation issue. That's like, how often is this specific product? Like, you could have a great vendor who sells a shitty product.
Yeah,
How much effect?
there's actually seller ratings and there's product ratings are different in Amazon. As a seller, you have a rating, and as a product, you have a rating. Most people focus on the product, but sellers do have ratings separate.
Yeah. So, like, when a user leaves a negative review for a product, does that impact the vendor of the product, or the product?
There's a long discussion on this. It's hard to, but basically, most people I work with, and I'm mostly called a private label seller. So by being a private label seller, it's called as I'm both the brand and the seller. But so that would hurt me because I'm the only seller on the listing. I don't want other sellers because it's my brand. So, but on like Apple iPhone, yeah, that would hurt Apple's listing. But of course, obviously, Apple has so much volume. But of course, the negative product would hurt Apple's iPhone. But you could also, they try to get the seller to get a negative review. It's not as easy or as visible. But the seller also has it's usually related to the delivery, the customer support. It's not as commonly seen, but the seller has a rating. In eBay, there was only buyers or sellers had ratings. The products didn't because they were expired. They were expiring.
Yeah, the idea being the vendor shouldn't sell something, if they're getting negative reviews, right?
And I put in chat a few 3 points. I don't know when to discuss those. And I called out John for one of them.
Chat just now, this chat? Here,
in the chat at his town hall, yeah.
There we go. Relay notes being included in service provider. I don't know, and John, feel free to chime in here if you...
Yeah, I don't know if John saw the chat either.
In terms... What?
I don't know if he's recognized or seen that chat.
But yeah, for protocol services, I still am not sure where the relay node sits, and I think that'll become clearer next week. John, I don't know if feel free to again chime in if you do know or have an idea. But like the idea of like how do we pay the relay node? I think we'll have to keep like a smart contract funded, I think. But I actually don't know. I mean, I think I'm speaking too far out of my, I don't know enough about how we're going to have to keep that funded to be able to integrate that. Yeah. In terms of like this diagram, right? Like, because it would, in my mind, it sits somewhere down here, and it's like it's like a service being operated by the marketplace. And so I don't know, but it could be a service operated by the DAO, by the protocol DAO. I just don't know yet.
I don't know if everybody's even following. This has been evolving. I don't know. Does James, are you following this, or we can catch up offline? But John, do you have any comments on this?
I am following.
Okay, great. I know there's a lot of changes or things happening. I'm not sure if John's with us, but That was one point. The other point is, I think you actually gave me that
Yeah, I hear
idea.
you.
Oh, you're here, John. Do you have a comment on that? Relay nodes being
No, I
in
don't think those are really important distinctions right now. Like we'll pay the relay node somehow, but I don't think we need to. It doesn't really affect the overall architecture, I don't think.
On the marketplace, so the second point on the chat is the reward. I believe I liked your idea of like rewarding people for finding miscategorized or product listing errors in listings.
I think that is like, so I posted a little bit ago in the Chatting Governance DAO like channel, I believe. Chatting Governance DAO. Let me see. Yeah. And I believe you saw it. Yeah. The community notes idea. I think that because like when we were talking about like finding miscategorized products, that was back when we understood like the filtering of items for DAOs to happen like at this level, and they would like decide that they wanted to like include items that had certain categories, right? And that was when we like understood the filtering as taking place on a per item level rather than on a vendor level, right? So I think we've changed now, and now it's like vendors are the people that we care about, and like a DAO can kick a vendor if they're like posting products that they don't want. And I think the moderation and filtering, like justice, should operate like I want to think about like that in terms of like the Twitter community notes. And yeah, and so I think it would roll into like the justice thing, and it would be like, you know, everybody is, I mean, like as much as I hate the idea, but like everybody's a cop, and everybody is like, you know, monitoring the products, and if they see, you know, if you see something, say something. I don't know why all of this is like such, you know, national security speak, but yeah, anybody can basically report an item that like shouldn't be in the store, and then like if enough people also agree that it shouldn't be in the store, then it like raises a dispute, and the DAO can like kick a vendor. Is how I think that system should work.
Of course, it does have this. I mean, it does have the negative, but you know, even back when I was a kid, there was neighborhood community watch, right? And it was like, I went to some of the meetings with my parents at the, like somebody's backyard in the suburbs, and we talked about different concerns in our community. That's healthy, but of course, you're thinking the negative now is like the point system in China with like you report bad people and you disassociate bad people to not get your points lowered. But I feel like it's healthy. It's good that we're all like policing the system and ensuring the integrity of the ecosystem compared to.
Yeah, but, you know, I think something to not forget here too is, you know, if everyone is having a problem with how we execute that, then they can make a vote with the Loadpipe DAO in order to actually change how we execute things. So, you know, especially if it's some sort of formula.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah. No, I mean, and I think.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, yeah. So there's like justice up here, and maybe, you know, I need to block out a space and just say like a product / vendor, because I think that they should be similar systems, or at least I think that they should be linked, right? There's the dispute process, right? I guess like the way to think about it is like we have a justice system and we have police, right? And in our system, judges and police officers are the same thing, and it's just that, like, you know, every citizen, right, is a police officer, is a judge, and again, I recommend anyone going through that post. I think it's a post from Vitalik actually, where Vitalik like goes through and like examines how the Twitter community notes system works and how that ends up with like people making judgments about whether or not something is true or false, right? So it's a way of like gaining reputation for making judgments and arriving at some notion of truth, right? Allowing a citizenry to act as oracles for subjective truth. And so, yeah, I think like what happens is like if enough people get to the point where like in Twitter there would be or like in X there would be a community note added to a tweet, then that would initiate the dispute process, right? So like you have this accusatory arm, like the police arresting people, and then you have a justice system to determine whether or not like they actually violated the terms of service or something like that. And yeah, so, in my mind, I think that's how it should work. I would be open to other suggestions.
So there's costs and there's like tokenomics inside that action. Is there a cost to do that?
Is there a cost? What do you mean?
If I report a product, do I have to pay a gas fee or a token fee or something? If it's,
I mean, you shouldn't have to, right? I think that's maybe somewhere between an account abstraction question and a like marketplace UI question.
Well, what if could I be rewarded for doing it at least? You know, like if I'm highlighting products that do violate and I'm keeping the thing well, I should be getting rewarded in this ecosystem, right?
Yeah, and I think that's like, okay, so what is like our emissions, what is this emissions formula for judges? And what is like our rating system for judges? Like, I think both of those things factor into that. But yeah, I mean, like, I agree, right?
Okay.
Like a judge, and some of the like, the rendered verdict here, right? Like if you participate in a judgment, like you should be rewarded for making a correct judgment. If you have a high rating, then you should be getting more, and similarly to the way that we're thinking about marketplaces, high rating plus lots of cases should mean more emissions, right? So like same thing here, right? Rating and weighting, right? There's like, we need to arrive at a way to rate a judge. And my initial like pitch for that is, I think I outline it. Yeah, I outline it a little bit here, where if you submit a vote on a judgment, then you're also forced to upvote and downvote a sample of other verdicts. And that is how we like get to a rating of you as a judge, is how many people agree or disagree with your verdicts in general. And then similarly here in that community notes post, like, that system is like the more notes you leave that other people that end in like an actual action, then the higher your rating goes, right? And so like, yeah, a combination of like how many times are you right versus how many times in total are you initiating disputes or are you initiating like moderation actions? Like, yeah, I think that's a way of arriving at some,
Excuse me,
right.
Bo, is the only way to rate a judge taking into account how many votes agree with that judge or not? Is that the only way to rate judges?
I don't know if it's the only way. It's the only way that I've thought of. Again, I don't know what else, because again, it's like we're arriving at like subjective truth, and so like other people's opinion to me is the only thing that can really like is any sort of like measurable metric for that. Like, but what else would there be?
Oh, well, that depends on the case being judged, but I would say there are some objective indicators out there. Like, for example, in the case of a product dispute, there are some indicators that would seem to weigh the case for a certain actor. Like, for example, did the guy ship the product? Yes or no? Is there evidence of that the product was delivered? Yes or no? And that sort of thing,
Yeah, but like if the outcome of the case is like, like the outcome of a case would involve multiple people rendering judgments, right? And so like we can't, it would be people weighing the evidence and then, deciding what was right or not. Like, I don't know that like we can have, like if we could build an automated system that just said like, oh, this is true or this is not, and weigh that against what people's like subjective judgment is on it, then that would be a way, like, to determine a rating score on an objective basis. But we can't build a system that can be sure. We can look at indicators, and then hopefully, based on those indicators, the judges arrive at the right decision. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how to measure. Like, we can't measure against objectivity, I think, in cases like this, right?
Yeah,
like,
but you could take into account both. For example, the judges would seem to vote one way, and the so-called objective indicators would seem to vote in another way. So if the circumstantial evidence is different from what the majority of judges are saying, then yeah, I guess that in that case you could penalize a judge who's not in agreement with that, and reward judges based on how well they agree with each other. I don't know if I'm making myself understood. This is a really abstract idea.
Yeah, well, because it's just that, like, I don't think, like, I'm sorry, is there someone else?
Yeah, I guess the point I'm getting hung up on is, how do you objectively determine what an objective indicator is, without developing a system, as Bo had said, because, at the end of the day, if people are determining what is objectively true, then it's kind of a subjective judgment. And the only reason it's objectively true is because enough people think it is objectively true. And so, if the end goal is still seeing whether or not judges are voting in the direction that is supported by the objective truth, or let's call it the majority truth, we still are doing that via an upvote, downvote system. I think there are other ways that we can do it. So it doesn't just have to be upvotes and downvotes, but you can look at the final verdict of the judge and then look at the resolution of the case and see if the judge voted in a way that agrees with the final verdict as well. Sorry if I'm rambling here.
No. Well, the thing is, I don't know if I'm too comfortable with the idea that judges get penalized for disagreeing with everybody else. That's basically it. In some cases, it could be that way, but in other cases, not, because maybe that judge is the only one taking into account the objective evidence pointing in a certain way.
Yeah, I don't think we need to penalize them as much, maybe if it's like a repetitive action. Because most of the judges, I don't think they're going to have any incentive to be a bad actor. So really we are rewarding, I suppose, in this system, the people who come to the conclusion that the majority of people support. And that's not always correct, but how do you do it better?
Yeah, well, but I tend to agree. I don't know that this is necessarily necessary. I'm sorry, I don't know that this step is necessary, like penalizing incorrect judges, because we're creating a game and we hope that the outcome of that game is to arrive at truth, right? And we imagine that each of the judges is like sort of an independent actor, and so like a process whereby like a judge submits a verdict and then they're given like a number of other verdicts, and then they upvote and downvote those verdicts, right, based on how much they agree, how persuasive, how thoughtful, right? And then like maybe there's another question, which is like, would you, after reading these, would you switch your vote, right? And then we just don't, if we're not, well,
if we have enough judges, it shouldn't.
What?
I said if we have enough judges, the judge penalty probably isn't necessary. I think with this system, and perhaps I'm optimistic here, but if you have a large enough sample size, I think it's going to be a statistical anomaly for a bunch of people to just vote incorrectly.
Well,
One question: Are judges volunteers, or are they? Is it like a job they're paid for, or are they volunteers?
Both. I mean, it's not a full-time job, I think. I think it's one of those things that we incentivize, and through token emissions and through
It's like
again system rewards.
Uber drivers. It's Airbnbs. It's like
Yeah.
In a cool way.
Yeah, we would just like notify a bunch of people like, hey, you've been selected. You could, or like we would give them maybe like a justice portal where they could go and they could like make judgments and they could earn money, right? Because we have a budget to supply it, right? And we would say, hey, yeah, you just like do this and leave a judgment and then we'll pay you.
Maybe.
So if they can be penalized, that would kind of make it unattractive for them to become judges if they can be penalized in the judging.
Yeah, no, I agree. And but it's like the thing is like you want to create the incentive, or like I would like to create the incentive for truth rather than for rightness. Like I don't want people like I don't know. It's just like hard, right? Like how do you create? Go ahead.
One thing we can do is like the online survey approach. I'm not sure if you guys ever did something like this in college, but you can earn some beer money signing up for these survey sites. You fill out some user demographic information, and then periodically you're informed that there's a survey you can take. You take the survey, you get paid for it, and they do at the end of the day behind the scenes weigh all of the survey submissions from all of the different users against each other to see who is like clearly just clicking buttons and not caring. And they don't penalize them financially, they penalize them by giving them less surveys. So, we could do something like that.
Well, I mean, like I think the something like that, again, like the community notes, is like how often like we can correct for randomness through rating, right? Like if we trust that at least like some percentage of people are honest, then ranking other people's, like reviews, like that step here where like you lock in a verdict and then you have to like upvote, downvote other verdicts. Yeah, similar to Mechanical Turk, right? You upvote, downvote other people's verdicts. That was like the solution I came up with for like correcting for randomness and like and people just like especially if there's no like, and the disincentive or like the punishment for being wrong was again also sort of a check against like random judgment, right, where someone just comes in and says one side or the other. But yeah, I think if we do it like this and your rate and ranking of verdict is what determines your payout of the reward pool, then we don't need to like penalize a incorrect judgment. We can just give more reward to the more correct judgment, which is theoretically the verdict that is highest ranked of the correct verdicts. Correct, of course, being the like winning side, not necessarily the true side.
Yeah, and again, depending on what our sample size is for the amount of judges, it's the same as flip a coin 50 times. If you flip a coin 50 times, it's roughly going to be like 25, 26. Though you can of course have variance at like lower levels of flips. And so if it's a large amount, and we're assuming some people are just going through and always saying no or always saying yes, that should balance out.
It's the only mechanism for judging judges based on how much they. Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear other ideas on how to arrive at a ranking for judges. It's the only answer I've come up with. But yeah, would love to hear another proposal as to how to do that.
Okay, my other point, I don't know if you saw it, but the Amazon Vine or reviewers, that's I guess at a marketplace style level. But if these reviews are left on a protocol level, is that a service of the protocol? Like, I do think there is a good value of like quality reviews left by verified, approved professional reviewers in today's world.
Yeah, I think that falls into the buyer ratings category, and probably, we don't have an emissions for buyers. I think an emission for reviewers. I do think. How does current ranking work of public judges? Do you mean like I would ask like where do you mean? And I would probably say like it's how many powerful people do you know that will appoint you to like a judgeship? I mean, like yeah, if you're talking about the United States, then it's just like, do you know the president? Did you go to Yale? Were you in Skull and Bones? There's no ranking for judges. In the United States, you just get appointed to like a level of judgeship, right? And there's different requirements for being appointed to different levels of judgeship, right? So you could be like a circuit court judge, county court judge. That would require like an appointment, I think, by like a mayor. In Texas, there's an election for judges, but there's no like global ranking. No, there's no system. There's no ranking system for judges. The system is like the system, you know, like the man, you know, it's like the Ivy League. Like, you could argue that maybe the ranking system is like placement in law school and the law school rankings, but even then, that's just like sort of a backwards metric of who do you know, and then how powerful are those people, and what fraternities were you in. So that was the other proposal, Alex. And I'll come back to, so I haven't read Jose or James's messages yet, but that was the other proposal. Like, that was how we were thinking about it at first, was like, we have a judge registry and Loadpipe DAO, you know, then the executive decision would be like, we add a judge to the registry. And so they're managing their judge registry. And then like the Hamza DAO is managing its judge registry. But then it's like, you know, it functionally, at that point, it just becomes like a workflow, right? Whereas like this community note sort of system allows everyone to be a judge. It doesn't create this like class of judges. So I guess that's what it is. It's like, when we're talking about these like rankings and how do we rate a judge and everything like that, if we were to create it in that way, where the foundation like is appointing a judicial branch, is appointing judges to judicial seats, then that would be like the traditional system, where it's a question of like, who do you know? You have to apply. There's like a top-down process. Like, you only have to keep the people in the governance systems happy, and you know they're the only ones with power to like fire you. Whereas, you know, this system is a little bit more decentralized and automated, gives everyone, like, there is no, like, special class of judges. There's just anybody who wants to participate, and the more they participate and the better they participate, the more power they have in that system. And I think that's why, at least I shifted in thinking about it this way.
Whoa.
Yeah, what's up?
I mean, I guess you follow a bit the Clara's decision-making process for this?
Yeah, a little bit. So there's...
I think it could fit our purpose in the sense that normally, like Jose was saying, in e-commerce transactions, there is an average things that can normally go wrong either way, and that, I imagine, it could be put into a smart contract in a way that when anybody who is going to be a judge is going to decide this case, they already have like the choice, you know, things that can be done. Let's say, if you know was the package shipped? Yes. Did it arrive in good condition? Yes. You know, did the parties use an escrow account? Yes or no? And based on this, the judges, you know, basically select what their decision is, you know, from the contract itself. Like there's not that much room. There shouldn't be that much room for decision making, you know, so for others to judge what the judges are, you know, why they are deciding what they are deciding. It's more like, I guess we can kind of foresee in a smart contract what can go wrong, and then, you know, the judges, based on the evidence, they just decide. And as you say, if a judge decides against everybody else, well, probably he gets negative rating. that is, I guess, the simplest way of at least starting the system. And this is basically the way I think that the people in Claros are working, right?
Yeah, so I mean, and that is sort of what we're thinking of, right? Is that like, so let's like talk through a test case, right? Like, so a vendor sends an item, and let's say that the truth is that it is delivered, and the item is fine, but a buyer raises a dispute and says, like I mean, like that the item was like never shipped. There's like harder cases where it's like, oh, the item was broken, and the person could have broken it themselves. But let's just say the truth is that the person says that it was never delivered, but it was, and so they raise a dispute, and it costs them like maybe a little bit of money to raise this dispute, which is what the like sort of bounty is on raising a dispute. I could go either way on that. Then there's like this functionally discovery period where they like attach their evidence to the case, and then the vendor has to be notified that a dispute has been raised, and then the system asks them to attach their evidence, right, for the case. Then once that like discovery period is done, we determine how long that is. Then it's just pushed out. And, again, to Jose's point, like Claritarian, right? We take a random sample of all eligible judges, which would be vendors, buyers, governors, anyone, right? We take a large number and we just send a notification to their profiles, and we say, hey, like you could take up this case in the justice, tab. They tab over to justice. They look at the evidence provided by the vendor. They look at the evidence provided by the buyer. They determine like, oh, it was shipped. Here's the shipping, information. Like, here's the receipts and everything like that. They say like, no refund. Buyer should and they say like, and it would be like, who do you? Maybe there's like a select list of things that can be done, right? And generally judges are like, oh no, we should not refund them. That's fine. And then everybody is required to write like just reasoning, right? Like, why did you arrive at the decision that you decided, right? And then when they submit, they lock in their like vote and their reasoning. And then before they submit, they have to like upvote or downvote other people's verdicts, right? Their reasoning as to why, right? And that allows us to like, who is consistently putting in verdicts, whose verdicts are consistently upvoted or downvoted. That allows us to arrive at the reputation for the judges. And then as people get more, good reputation in judgments, they're the ones who are primarily being pushed like cases. And so, it takes a little while to build up like a set of people who are like committed to judging. And then those people end up getting like that. That's how the system should work in my mind, in theory, right? Does that make sense?
So I guess the difference is that the let's say the rating is done by the judges themselves instead of by the code, right? Like I understand, like for example, in Claros, they don't judge each other. Like whoever judges different, they get downgraded.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I think maybe that like punish incorrect judges was there, is because that's how they do it. But also the way they do it is they require the judges to put a stake forward. So like in order to take a case, you have to put money up, and you're basically like betting on yourself, right? Like to render a judgment that is correct and in line with the other judges. They also have like smaller, like judgment pools, right? And they have like longer periods. So like they have like, long, like it's a smart contract. It's what's called a state machine. And so it goes through like an innumerable list of states before it like arrives at a judgment. But again, it's like in their world, they have this class of judges which puts up money in order to render judgments. And I think like, maybe let's try and be a little bit more like community notes. Let's let anybody participate in the justice process if they want to, and then find a way to arrive at a rating for people who do good work in judgment.
I don't know if you saw my chat. Oh, but what requiring people to sometimes participate, or even like using it as an indicator of their like reputation in the ecosystem potentially? Even sellers themselves could.
Yeah, we could. I mean, I don't know. I think that people should just have the freedom to do what they want to do, right? Like in a DAO, right? We should. If someone doesn't want to be a judge, I don't think they should have to be. I think they can be select. Like part of the reason why when I say like randomly selected, I mean like say we have like 20,000 people in the system, we should randomly select like 5,000 of them, and then it's like when we hit like 100 people, that's when the case is considered closed. So like we just make a ton of people eligible to be a judge for any given case, and then we close it when a certain critical number of people render a judgment. It is sort of my idea. And so like in that world, we wouldn't require people to make judgments, but we would allow people to make as many judgments as they wanted. Or they could just like turn it off. They could say, I don't want to engage in justice. But it would be an avenue to like earn money in the system.
Okay, yeah. We're at the hour mark. James had to hop. I think this has been I think today's call's been pretty structured. How do you feel, Bo?
Yeah, I mean, I feel good about it. I mean, like I said at the beginning, like we can. I mean, like we do end up just going into different and like into different areas. All of these like little boxes need to be like filled out and fleshed out. And I think they're coming together a little bit more, and maybe we need to start like deciding beforehand, like, okay, this is the box we're going to talk about today. And, again, any work anybody wants to do in these boxes in between, please feel free. And I know that we're going to be pretty busy next week, but I think we'll do a little bit more work on it then. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I mean, like, yeah, I think we figured some things out, but yeah, we still have a lot more work to do.
Yeah, I'm just chatting. I think Jose maybe could also add some value into between the calls. I mean, he's always got great insights here, but we can talk about that later. Any other? I mean, should we cut here or keep going, or what do you think?
Just by the way, sorry, I just wanted to say, like, Jose, when you link this, like, Claritarion. You linked this like a long time ago as well, and that was what served as like the basis of my like theorizing about that whole like community note justice idea. So first of all, I just want to recognize, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I think randomness is a great mechanism for ensuring fairness in judgments. It's what levels the playing ground.
Yeah. Prevents high-level collusion.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that's part of the drawback of having a class of judges, right? Similar, to what I was talking about with you, Alex. Like, that's what exists now, right? The current justice system is a class of judges. There's no like accountability. There's no like public accountability, except in the case of like Texas judges who are, who have to have elections, right? And so if someone doesn't like what a Texas judge is doing, then they go and they lose the election, right? And that's happened in the recent past. So there have been campaigns because like I remember in particular, there was a Texas judge who was like giving measurably harsher sentences to black people in her district, I believe. And she was voted. There was a huge campaign to get her voted out, and they did, right? But generally, accountability doesn't exist within the judicial branch in the United States. You can look to the Supreme Court and like, the Clarence Thomas getting like houses and jets paid for by like a billionaire like sugar daddy, and nothing happens to him. There is no accountability in the Supreme Court because you're just appointed, and then that's it. And it mirrors some of the problems I think that we have with Amazon. And so how do we do it differently? Hopefully like this.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Unless there's any other comments, questions, I think we're good for today.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
All right. Thank you, guys. Till next week.
Yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. Cheers.